I'll start. This morning I'm going to continue with the ascending 5 ranks of Kokun ranks of Tozan. And this is the 4th rank, the 4th of the 5th, and it's called collective awakening or collective achievement. And I'll read the verse, and then later on in the talk, I'll be presenting each line of the verse in a little more detail. So the verse says, Buddhas and living beings do not hinder one another. The mountain is high and deep the water. In the midst of contraries, clear understanding wins the day. A myriad fresh flowers blooming where the partridge calls. So a monk asked Tozan, what does accomplishing mutually mean? And this accomplishing mutually is translated in other places as collective awakening. And Tozan said, not attaining things, not attaining things. So if we don't attain anything, there's nothing to attain. That means that nothing is separate from us. So we're everything without exception. So let's unpack that a little bit more, what it means to not attain anything or not attaining things. So when the Buddha was enlightened, according to one of the sutras, it said, I and all beings everywhere have simultaneously enlightened. So there was no gap between the Buddha and all beings. He had totally merged, and there was not a hair's breadth of difference between him and anyone else. At least that's the way he experienced it. So think of, as an example, dyeing a piece of cloth. The fabric penetrates every fiber of the cloth, and they're inseparable. You can't discern what is dye and what is cloth. And if we think of a substance like brass, what is brass? It's an alloy of copper and zinc. So it's neither copper nor is it zinc. So according to the dictionary, an alloy is a substance composed of 2 or more metals intimately united, usually by being fused together or dissolving in each other when molten. So that's how you make brass, is that you heat up copper and zinc together. And you know what they do? They're so intimate that the atoms of the copper become part of the crystal structure of the zinc. And the atoms of the zinc are in the crystal structure of the copper. They just kind of replace each other in each other's crystal structure. So now that's intimate. So that's what not attaining things means, is intimacy. So intimate that you don't know where you end and I begin. You transform, and there's no small I that we're used to and from which we function. It just transforms. And in the Diamond Sutra, it says, dwelling in no place, raise the Bodhi mind. So it's not attaining a single thing, not even a place, dwelling in no place. There's no place like home. And there's no place, and then it becomes home. So that's what it means. There's no place like home, dwelling in no place. So the famous Sufi mystic Rumi said, "You're not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in one drop." So it's easy to consider everything as separate from oneself. So many things we dislike, we resist identifying ourselves with them. Who wants to admit that there's a mini Trump inside, or an angry teen who brings a automatic rifle to an elementary school and kills 17 children? On the other hand, it's relatively easy to identify with the soft spring rain that cleanses the air and the land, or a litter of baby foxes like we had in front of the Abbey several weeks ago. But it might be hard to identify with saintly people, such as Mother Teresa, since we all have a lower opinion of ourselves. Jesus said, if you bring forth what is in you, then what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will kill you. The irony is that the defenses we create to protect us from pain create more pain. In the process, we deny important aspects of ourselves. They need to be integrated if we want to be whole, healthy, spontaneous beings capable of helping ourselves and others. The only way to undo the negative karma we've created is by peacefully connecting with our heart and abiding in that awareness without impatience and without expectation. By deconstructing our defenses, fixed images, hidden assumptions, we discover the original nature of our mind, which is clear, bright, and skillful. And when we stop living from habit and open our heart mind, we're able to manifest peace, love, and compassion. In the process of a spiritual transformation, it's crucial to treat our inner perpetrator with compassion. Saint, devil, victim, and perpetrator are just one mind. Barbara Brown Taylor, a Episcopal minister, said the hardest spiritual work in the world is to love the neighbor as the self, to encounter another human being not as someone you can use, change, fix, help, save, enroll, convince, or control, but simply as someone who can spring you from the prison of yourself if you will allow it. So it's safe to stay in our comfort zone. But when we realize the profound and subtle meaning of this fourth stage in practice, we'll realize that there is no good and no bad, because as Tozan says, you do not attain anything. Good, bad, right, wrong, acceptable, unacceptable, lovable, unlovable. See, all of that judging, as it says in affirming faith and heart mind, the perfect way is not difficult for those who do not pick and choose, constantly judging good and bad. And the truth is, we never know what's going to be good and what's going to be bad. I can give you many examples in my own life, and I think I have in the past. I'll give another quote. This one's from Bertrand Russell, the philosopher and mathematician. He said, "Many people desire those things, good things, only for themselves and their friends. They're quite content that their enemies should suffer. Humankind has become so much one family that we cannot ensure our own prosperity except by ensuring that of everyone else. If you wish to be happy yourself, you must resign yourself to seeing others also happy, including those that you disagree with or dislike." Another translation I saw of Tozan's answer to the monk who asked, "What is collective awakening?" He said, "Not one matter." So we've been talking about not attaining things, but not one matter. The title Collective Awakening might give you the impression that it means multitudes of people awakening together and then forming a formidable force that marches together to create good. But if there's not one matter, where do all of the awakened people come from? It's more like you collect everything until there is nothing left to collect, and there's nothing to attain, and there is not one matter. So what you do is you collect everything, and you become one with everything. That's what this means, collective awakening. Reminds me of the Japanese word dai, which is in some people's names, which means large. But it means so large that there's no outside. So it includes everything and excludes nothing. And when you realize the state of dai, you also realize this rank of collective awakening. So let's review the first three stages, which will set the stage for the fourth stage. So the first one was shift. So in order to practice the Buddha way, there has to be a shift in your attitude, just as the Buddha did. You feel the pain of life and uncertainty of sickness, old age, and death. At some point, you decide it's important to resolve these issues, and your whole being shifts. Some of you have had Jukai, and during the ceremony, you vow to maintain certain precepts. At the most fundamental level, it means that you reveal your life as these precepts. It's not a question of following some moral teaching. You are the moral teaching itself. That vow is a shift, and these vows continue without end. And the next stage is submission. Once you vow to follow the Buddha way, you have to submit to the truth of the Buddha way. So Alcoholics Anonymous has a 12-step program to sobriety. And one of the steps said, "I came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity." So a Buddhist interpretation of this step would be, I came to believe that a power other than my small self could restore me to wholeness. So you have to surrender to that power. So what is it? Awakening is the next stage. This is a dropping away of body and mind. So what remains? Our habit-ridden consciousness. We'll have to work on our ingrained ways of behaving. They can be hurtful to others and to oneself because these habits are unconscious. Even seeing your true self does not mean you can embody it or actualize it because of all of this habitual way of behaving, our habit-ridden consciousness. That's why there's additional stages after awakening. So this fourth stage, collective awakening. So we could retitle it as Everything is the Buddha. That includes everything we do, everything we see, all beings everywhere, the great earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. Master Hakuin in his song of Zazen said sentient beings are primarily Buddhas. It's like ice and water. Apart from water, no ice can exist. Outside sentient beings, where do we find the Buddhas? So the first line says, Buddhas and living beings do not hinder one another. It's the first line of Master Tozan's verse on this case. Buddhas and living beings do not hinder one another. There are no Buddhas above and no living beings below, and everything is whole and complete as it is. It's not one-sided, there's mutual responsibility, such as between students and teachers. So we're not only humans practicing to be Buddhas, but we're Buddhas practicing to be fully human. I once had advice from an old Buddhist teacher to see everyone as the Buddha. What would it be like if you went to the grocery store and you saw everyone as the Buddha? That includes all the other shoppers, all the employees stocking the shelf, the cashiers, the pharmacists, the bakers, the butchers, and the candlestick makers. So how about when you're driving a car? Can you see all of the other drivers as the Buddha? How about your partner, or your boss, or your co-workers? Everywhere you look, there's Buddha, including inside yourself. As Master Hakuin said in the Song of Zazen, this very body is the body of Buddha. Do you believe it? I mean, really believe it. If you really believe it, then what's the problem? The second line says, the mountain is high and deep the water. It's obvious. Look out the window and I see Long's Peak. I've never climbed up it, but I hear it's not an easy climb. It's high. And when I was working as an oceanographer, I did scuba diving. Just right off the coast of California are these submarine canyons. One time I was scuba diving over the entrance to one of these canyons, and it was like a black, deep abyss. Just disappeared into the depths beyond you could imagine. So what's Tozan saying here? When I'm sad, I'm sad, and when I'm happy, I'm happy. When I'm sad, I'm not sad because I'm sad, and when I'm happy, I'm not happy because I'm happy. It's just when I'm sad, and when I'm happy, I'm happy. So if we take these lines, the first two lines together, living beings are perfect as they are. Well, even perfect, we should just say living beings are complete or whole as they are. So are inanimate objects. So another way of saying it is that ducks have short legs and flamingos have long legs. I don't know if ducks are jealous of flamingos for their long legs, or flamingos are jealous of ducks because they're closer to the ground and get to the food more easily. I doubt it. Just ducks have short legs, flamingos have long legs. In the Genjo Koan, Dogen wrote, when the need is large, it is used largely. When the need is small, it's used in a small way. Thus, no creature ever comes short of its own completeness. Wherever it stands, it does not fail to cover the ground. So even an insect, an ant, does not fail to completely cover the ground. Life is completely alloyed within each of us. Large and small don't come close to expressing it. Because everyone has the wisdom and virtue of the Buddha Tathagata. The third line says, in the midst of contraries, clear understanding wins the day. Maizumi Roshi didn't quite like that translation, and he said it's something like, with the 10,000 differences, how does one clarify them? So in the midst of contraries, all kinds of differences, how do you clarify them? Or clear understanding wins the day. In the Book of Equanimity, the last case, 100, states, a monk asked Kaku Osho of Roya, if the original state is clean and pure, then why suddenly do rivers, mountains, and the great earth appear? And Kaku replied, if the original state is clean and pure, then why suddenly do mountains, rivers, and the great earth arise? Yeah, I had somebody ask me once, why is there anything? Why is there anything at all? That's what this koan is pointing to. So this Kako Osho of Roya, he studied with Fumio Zensho and eventually became his successor. And during one winter training period, Fumio Zensho stopped the night zazen because it was so bitter cold. And everybody was having a difficult time. So one day when he was in his quarters trying to keep warm, an Indian monk arrived there. According to the story, he was flying on a cloud, and he begged the master not to waste the time. He said, though this congregation is not large, 6 of them are great vessels, and their path will give shelter to humans. So the very next day, Fumio continued the schedule. And one of those 6 is the master in this case, Kaku Osho of Roya. So when we sit here in the Abbey, sometimes it's hot in the Zendo and sometimes it's cold. We try to add heat in the winter and cold air in the summer, and it's not so bitter cold or so swelteringly hot that I've considered to alter the schedule. But consider, the determination of our ancestors. When Hakun inherited his teacher's temple, which was near us on the slopes of Mount Fuji, near his hometown called Hara, it was in such bad repair that you could see the stars through the roof. And when it rained, he had to carry a raincoat from the abbot's quarters to the zendo. So we're so fortunate. So in this case, the monk said, if the original state is clean and pure, then why suddenly do rivers, mountains, and the great earth arise? That comes from a scripture in which one of the disciples of the Buddha, Varuna, asked, if all the faculties and sense data in the world, the life clusters, the sense media, and elements of sense and consciousness and so forth, are all the mind of realization and thusness pure in the original state, why does it suddenly produce mountains, rivers, earths, and all the compounded characteristics that gradually change, influx, end, and then begin again? So in the koan, which was a Chinese monk, he distilled this question from the elaborate Indian presentation. If you read the sutras, they're really elaborate. This just gets right down to it. But Roya just seemed to repeat the question. He said, if the original state is clean and pure, then how does it suddenly produce rivers, mountains, and the earth? In Zen, we say this is mounting a bandit's horse to chase the bandit. In the mouth of the monk, these words are a question. In Roya's mouth, they're an exclamation. The original state is pure. Mountains and rivers suddenly appear. So what's the problem? The problem is that when painful or uncomfortable situations or feelings arise, we think they're not pure. The truth is that they're neither pure nor impure. They just are. But we interpret them in a way that fits our worldview. If it doesn't fit into our worldview, then it's impure. The basic problem is that a worldview is impure. It's based on false assumptions. The fundamental assumption that we are an independent, autonomous, unique self, and we need to protect and aggrandize it at all costs. We're willing to maintain that worldview, even at the expense of our happiness, our well-being, our health, our sanity, our peace. We'd rather criticize someone else to maintain our worldview than to open our heart and include them in it. In the 23rd case of the Mumonkan, the sixth patriarch said, think neither good nor evil at such a moment. What is your true self? The sixth patriarch's statement can be taken as an exclamation, and that statement is identical with Roya's. When you think neither good nor evil, the original state is pure. That is your true self. Mountains and rivers suddenly appear. A student said to Bankei, my wisdom is tightly confined within me, but I am unable to make use of it. How can I use it? At least he admits it's within him, and not somewhere else that he's looking. And Bankei said, my friend, come closer. When the student took a few steps closer, Bankei said, how wonderful. Well, you're using it. You use it all the time. If the original state is clean and pure, then why suddenly do mountains, rivers, and the great earth arise? If our wisdom is so tightly bound within us, how do we use it? Just cease to cherish your opinions and let it function freely. And the last line of the verse says, a myriad fresh flowers blooming where the partridge calls. A myriad fresh flowers blooming where the partridge calls. I think in the last week we talked about the partridge call. It's kind of a mournful call. So this line is reminiscent of the line in Genjo Koan where it says, flowers fall though we love them, and weeds sprout though we hate them. That's life. The partridge call is like nostalgia, thinking of earlier times. But this stage is the integration of absolute and relative. Even though we see the flowers and hear the partridge, there's no fixed place on which to stand. Abiding in no place, raise the Bodhi mind, the mind that seeks for enlightenment for oneself and others. So when we don't honor everything, it leads to waste through carelessness, sloppiness, and greed. In Japan, there's an annual memorial service by seamstresses for all of the needles they broke during the year. So when a zafu was out of place in the zendo, do you use your foot or your hand to replace it? When you hit a bell during a service, do you bring out its best quality? Or do you hit it so hard that it screams in pain? Or do you hit it so softly that it ignores you? How do you treat a piece of broken tile or an oddly shaped piece of drywall? So there's no creature, whether sentient or insentient, that ever comes short of its own completeness. Wherever it stands, it does not fail to cover the ground.